Alright, moving on to example 2. So example 2, basically we need to now convert percentages to decimals. So when we are converting percentages to decimals, what we do is we divide by 100. So first one, 723, we're going to divide that by 100. Now when we divide by 100, we put the decimal place at the end of the number. So we have 723 in this case. That's not a decimal number. So if it's not a decimal number, you put the decimal place at the end of the number. And then, because you're dividing it by 100, you're going to move it 2 places to the left. Okay, so my decimal will then become here. So this is going to become 7.23 as a decimal. So 7.23. I do the same with this one. I've got 13.45%. I need to convert a percentage to a decimal, so I need to divide that number by 100. Now that's already in decimal form, but it's written as a percentage. So when we're converting from percent to decimal, we need to divide it by 100. So we need to divide that number here, this number here, by 100. Okay, so I'll just write that again. 100. So we've got our decimal place here now. So we're going to move it 2 to the back. So 1 and 2. Now as you can see, there's no number there. Okay. So my decimal place is going to go there. I'm going to write 1, 3, 4, 5 after it. If there's no number there, you write the number 0. So that's going to become 0.1345. And that is my final answer. Okay. Now, looking at example 3, it says convert the following fractions and mixed numerals into percentages. So what you can do is you can just type these into your calculator. So when we're typing in a fraction into our calculator, we will put 3/5 and then we times it by 100. So whenever you want to convert a fraction to a percentage, you have your fraction, you type in your fraction in the calculator, and then you times that by 100. Okay, so if I want to convert 3/5 to a percentage, I'm going to go 3/5 times 100, get my answer. If I want to convert 7/40 into a percentage, I'll go 7 divided by 40 times 100, get my answer. Okay, now one thing you need to be aware of is when you're typing them into your calculator, use brackets. Okay, so put your fraction in a bracket, times it by 100. And then this one here will give you 60%. And then this one here, 7/40 again, we're going to put that in a bracket. We're going to times it by 100. And you will get 17.5%. Or 17.5%. You don't have to answer it in a fraction form. Okay, over here we've got 2 1/4. Now we know that a quarter as a decimal is 0.25, and we also know that a quarter is 25%. Yes, we know that a quarter is 25%. So with this one, we've got 2 wholes here. Now 1 whole would be 100%, 2 wholes would be 200%. So we've got 200% plus the 25%, which is a quarter. So 200% plus 25% is 225%. Okay, now, again, if you just wanted to times that by 100, that would work as well. Okay, so you're going to go 2 plus 1/4 times 100, and you should get 225%. So, we can do, with this one, I would go 2.25. I would write that as a decimal, and then I would times that by 100 just to make sure that I do it correctly, okay? Because sometimes you can get mixed up with the brackets when it's mixed numbers. So if it's a mixed number, put in your whole number, put a decimal point, and then find out what that fraction is. Write that there, and then times it by 100. So we're going to get 225%. Okay, now 2/3. Okay, again, we times that by 100. So we should get 66%. Or if we're going to round off, we can get 67%. But it would be 66%. recurring. But you can't really write recurring here as a percentage. So I would just put, let's see what they did. Oh, they did, okay. Alright, so I will just leave it at 66%. They did a little bit differently. That's okay. I will just leave it at 66%. Okay? Alright. So I would like you to copy this down into your rules book. And we're going to be moving on to the final example. I just want to draw your attention back to this one. Sorry guys. So here, when you put this into the calculator, you're going to get 66 point, and you're just going to keep getting 6 recurring. Okay, so that's what's going to happen. It's just going to be recurring. Now, you can round it off to 67%, but it's not very accurate, okay, because you've overestimated. Yes, you do need to round up to the nearest, so if that's 0.6, we need to round that up to 7. That is correct if we're going to answer to the nearest percent. But in this case, what you can do, if you wanted to write this accurately, you can write 66 as a whole number, and then the 0.66 we know is going to be 2/3, because that's what 2/3 is. It's 0.66, isn't it? So, you can write 66 and 2/3%. Now, the reason I'm doing that, that just means 66 plus 2/3%. When you times, if I write 2/3 as a decimal, I'm going to get 0.6666 recurring, okay? Now, if I times that by 100, okay, if I times that number, oh, it's very messy, sorry. If I times this number here by 100, what would happen is this decimal place would move 2 to the right, wouldn't it? So you would end up with 66.666 recurring. So what we need to do, we know that this 0.666 is 2/3, right? So we've got 66 whole plus 2/3. So we can write it as 66 and 2/3%. I wanted to draw your attention to that. Why is this important? When we ask you to round off, if they asked you to round off to the nearest whole number, I would round that off to 67%. But in this case, and there are some situations where it's never a good idea to round off too early. So if I was to use this calculation and then carry it on to something else, and if I just say I wanted to, you know, it was part of the calculation and then there was an extra step that was involved in order for me to get my final answer, if I was to round that off to 67, I wouldn't get a very accurate answer in the end, okay? So you have to keep that in mind. So that's why I was reluctant to round it off to 67, because I knew that there was another way of doing this. And the other way is to represent it like this, okay? If you're unsure about it, come on Google Meet and I can go through it with you again. So I would like you to copy this down into your rules book, thank you. Finally, we have the final example which says convert the following decimals to percentages. Converting decimals to percentages is very easy. All we have to do is move the decimal place. So it's basically, we have to times the decimal by 100 and then it will be converted to a percentage. So, first one, 0.458, we're going to times it by 100. The decimal place is here, we're going to move it 2 places to the right. So we go 1 and 2, so then we're going to end up with 45.8%. So the first one's done. Second one, we're going to times this by 100. Okay, so when we're timesing by 100, move it 2 places. So we're going to go 1, 2 to the right. Now, whenever there's no number, okay, we put a 0 there. And okay, so whenever there's no number, we replace that number there with a 0. Whenever there's a loop and there's no number in the loop, we put a 0 there. So this is going to become a whole number, so it's going to become 1,750. Okay, percent. Alright, I would like you to copy that down to your rules book, and I will put some questions on the classroom for you to complete from your textbook. If you have any questions, if there's anything that you don't understand, please come on Google Meet and please ask for help. Thank you.